All right, hello everybody. We're going to get started. I thank you for being here for David Overturf's reading. Before we get started with that, we have one of our short work readers who will be presenting her work. So we have Rosella Mosteller. And I'm just going to read her little bio here. Rosella has a strong education in the visual fine arts and creative writing, beginning with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and ending with Academy of Art University, San Francisco. Scholarship honors connected to both of these exceptional institutions grant her a welcome to the world of art. You might see her biking or hiking city trails. If not, she could be outdoors learning more about nature and that which catches her eye. Mosteller's work is recognized by the Hockaday Museum of Art, Kalispell, Montana, Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area, Wyoming, and the state of Montana through their permanent collections. Come on up.
I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to the Montana Book Festival for juring me into this process and for being with David and his help and Julian's help today. I'm going to start by reading the acknowledgments of my book, Microscapes. It's my second book. My first book is Montana Mountains and More, and it is for sale at the Missoula Art Museum. This one is Microscapes. Acknowledgments. Years ago, I hiked with friends on a long jaunt of the Appalachian Trail. One of my cherished memories took place along a dirt, four-wheel drive road considered to be part of the trail. This turf was clearly one of the poorer areas of Appalachia. We passed a house with paint peeling off, wearing an aged roof garnished with a wraparound deck. A number of barefoot, scantily clad children played tag with seemingly not a care in the world as the phonograph on the front porch blared the tune, "He's got the whole world in his hands." What struck me was the sort of connecting that happens as we walk through life. It still rings true to me. Those connections might be brief, but very impactful for whatever reason. I have a stack of those connections and credit all of them in this acknowledgement. You could be my former professor, cook, garbage collector, mediator, or classmate. I think you could get the picture I'm painting. Yes, you have all helped me attain the desire, drive, and initiative to pass these images and writing onto you, the reader. I am grateful. And then I was juried into this event by presenting 5 short works, which are my original haiku. And so that's what I'll be reading for you next. Bookends in the wash pressed some volumes. I turned the leaves and read a while. I think I have a technical difficulty here. I need to be here to advance my slides. That would be great. Yeah. Okay. Darkness brought to light organic shapes of riddles. I search for meaning. Trace the aurora through Chala forest to rouse cold lizards and snakes. Time moves like the blood through our legs, pushing the years to only seconds. Prone, on my back, clouds chiseled 2 stepping stones on a cobalt blue sky.
David Overturf. David was born and raised in Billings, Montana. David has also lived, studied, worked, and lurked in Los Angeles, Florida, Missoula, Chicago, Costa Rica, New York City, Barcelona, and Seattle. He brings Road Trip Project 1000 Volume 1 to the Montana Book Festival, both a chronicle of a 25,000-mile road trip from Montana to Argentina and an introduction to Project 1000. Heretofore a poet, playwright, short story, and sketch comedy writer, this is his first book. Please welcome David Overturf.
I got the clicker on me. You just enjoy. You just, hopefully. Don't make a ruckus. Welcome. My name is, technically it's David Leslie Overturf. David looks better in print, but now that we're friends, Dave's fine. So, yeah, welcome. This is Road Trip, Project 1000 Volume 1, which is foreshadowing and optimistic that hopefully soon there'll be more volumes of Project 1000, which is a website and a community and a outreach program based on the notion that a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's a website online we'll get to. I told Sam I'd rein it in because there's a lot of information, but he's not here right now. So we're gonna talk just for a second about Project 1000. You can't have colons. By the way, the 1 to 1000 is a ratio, right? Ratio's a picture to 1,000 words. You can't have colons in web domain, so it's 1 dash 1000, Project 1 dash 1000. If you just typed up Project 1000 with a colon in it, you'd find it. But technically that's it. This is the main page. The recent, there's the navigation bar right there in red. It's on every page in black. And there's all sorts of little rabbit holes up there, sub-menus under main, resources, about, and access. Forums is just what it sounds like. Let's go back here for a second. The most recent 5 submissions are right here. Oh, I can't do green. They're right in the center. The most recent 5 submissions, but that's going to be the extent of that for now. There's a lot of spelunking. You could spend some time there. These are all everything in the book except for the preface and the acknowledgments and some resources at the back for climate change companies that are focused on climate change, because I was not oblivious to the fact of my footprint in driving this distance, and this I understand that this adventure came at a price for the earth. So I am going to donate a portion of the proceeds of this to 5 different organizations which are mentioned at the end of the book and online, so fear not. So Project 1000, this is the book. It's both meditations on a 25,000 mile road trip and an introduction to Project 1000. Like I said, there's 29 images in the book. Each one has 1,000 words to it, hence the title and the whole thing. Picture's worth 1,000 words. By the way, I had a friend of mine who's a PhD student in Seattle help me with this, and he was the first guy who, other than me, that wrote a submission. He was so excited he sent it to me, and it had 864 words, and I got back to him. I said, "Hey, bro, it's not Project 1864." And he goes, "Oh, it's 1,000 words exactly?" I said, "That's the whole thing. It's the only rule. Like, there has to be 1,000 words in it." So this is one of the early, this is the first submission in there. I'll just read a portion of it. It's called Starting Fires. I fell in love with Chicago. My sister and 3 nephews lived a half hour west. Michael Jordan was leading the Bulls in their quest for a second three-peat. Chicago was the home of the Poetry Slam, and there were great spoken word open mics all over town. There were the Cubs at Wrigley Field, and there was jazz. A straight razor shave at a joint beneath the elevated train sealed the deal. Hardly anyone came to the play, and the cast would regularly just end up watching the Bulls game on a small TV in the box office. I decided to stay in Chicago, remaining there for 2.5 years, ironically, largely teaching. I was 9 months into a substitute teaching gig, which paid my bills and offered me job flexibility. It also offered the most terrifying front seat view of the daily dysfunctions, injustices, and horrors being perpetrated within the Chicago public school system. That's a whole other 1,000 words, at least. But the result was me being burned out, disillusioned, itchy. So in 1997, before any semblance of the internet as we know it today, I began to assemble a notebook of vehicle and visa requirements for driving a vehicle from the U.S. southwards. The dream was born. The work had begun. It would be 19 years before that dream came true. In the meantime, I needed to get out of Chicago. I visited my dear friend and college roommate in Quechee, Vermont. It was my first great solo road trip and my first life-changing dose of the Northeast United States in the fall. It was about 1,900 miles round trip and became the first of many visits to that area at that time of year, where the latitudes and seasons cast some sort of gorgeous spell over the land, the air, the sky, the leaves on the trees and those on the ground. This road trip would help release some pressure from the cooker, but it also might well have awakened a beast in me that has an impressive appetite for the road. I returned to Chicago focused on a trip far, far south. But the universe had other plans, as a West Side school on its third year of probation called me about a permanent teaching position. Surprise! When I had taken the Illinois State Teacher's Examination months earlier only to make more as a substitute teacher, my name was placed on a list. When I took the job in December, I was the third Spanish teacher for the year. I finished that school year and came back for another full year after that. One day, I was correcting papers in my classroom. I heard crackling. Then I smelled smoke. Then I saw the flames. It was the third fire set in school that day. So that's kind of the idea of Project 1000. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is kind of a different take on that. No one could ever know that by just looking at that picture. So it's really the story behind the picture, what all led up to that, and providing context to pictures. It's really a good exercise for writers and artists and photojournalists and just people. I live with my mother who's 81 years old, and I'm trying to get her to write for numerous reasons, to get keep her mind going and write down the history of pictures in the house, on the wall, in photo albums and stuff like that, and create, tell her 1,000 words for each picture. Really cool. This is the next one, Simmering. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. In 1999, I pulled out of Chicago, packed up my things, brought them 1,250 miles back to Montana, and was one of 4 adults to bring 14 kids from Montana to Costa Rica. When the group returned 2 weeks later, I stayed behind. I ended up finding a job making good money and renting cell phones. Unfortunately, the Costa Rican immigration department showed up one day asking for work permits. The boss helped me from being deported by paying a few bribes. As per the deal, I went to Nicaragua for a long weekend, but I was officially freaked out. I quit my job, rented a cheesy little 4x4, and spent my last 3 weeks rambling around luscious Costa Rica. I left Costa Rica on June 29, 2000. Mechanical problems, etc., caused me to miss my flight from Denver to Billings, and as it was the 4th of July weekend, there would be no getting out of there for at least a few days. I was not alone. There was a couple traveling from Italy on their way to Yellowstone National Park who were in the same predicament. I offered them a ride, but they said it wasn't in their budget. Shortly thereafter, I called Mom to tell her I would be driving home and to get a room ready for a nice Italian couple I had met at the airport. Claudio and Paola stayed a few nights with us in Billings, where we had barbecue, and took them to their first baseball game. 3 years later, 5,000 miles away, they would open up their home to me in Cella Ligure, Italy, at the tail end of a 60-day train trip through much of Western Europe. Some of the best people I've ever met, and certainly one of my favorite couples ever. Mom took a job in Cleveland. We packed up the house I grew up in and headed out. She straight to Cleveland, me to New York City, accepting a friend's offer to come and check it out. But I would be taking a more circuitous route via Yellowstone National Park, Grand Teton National Park, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Tucson, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Memphis, New Orleans, Birmingham, Atlanta, Asheville, Lynchburg, Chicago, Cleveland, Buffalo, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Boston. I arrived 45 days and 8,000 miles later during Game 3 of the 2000 World Series. There would be a 2,000-mile return to Billings a few months after 9/11, and an 1,800-mile road trip with my father and his wife, who visited me in Barcelona during Christmas 2002. It would be 12 years until I would see any meaningful road again. I would start a photography business, sadly shying away from my writing for this new, shiny, easier thing that proved it could make me some money. Soon I was renting a studio art gallery. Then I acquired some apartments. Then I stopped paying rent everywhere by putting a proposal together to purchase a building. The city bought it and helped, along with my parents, and I was anchored to Billings, Montana for the next 9 years. In 2014, I sold the apartments, paid off the remainder of my father's loan for the down payment, and my best friend of 40 years and I took a 1,300-mile road trip from Pau to Lourdes, France, then to Spain through Jaca, Pamplona, Burgos, León to Santiago de Compostela. Then it was north to A Coruña and Porto de Barres, then east along the northern coast of Spain through Arguero, Santander, Bilbao, and San Sebastián. We crossed back into France, passing through Bayonne and Bordeaux, finally settling around Bergerac for a week or so with his family. That dream the dream that was born in 1997 never died. It simmered in a pressure cooker of dreams, its lid removed a few times. Costa Rica helped. New York City helped. Living in Spain helped. Cute little road trips helped. But still, there were haunting whispers from way south. I had a things undone list, and this was one of the longest standing entries. In the summer of 2016, the stars finally aligned. After 4.5 years of decorating the storefront window with for sale/lease signs when the business wasn't rolling, and taking them down when it was, commercial property tire kickers gave way to a pair of serious and legitimate buyers. I was unattached and soon to be unencumbered by debt. The next right thing to do seemed clear. It was time to go on the big one. There was no plan B. Over my nearly 46 years, I had amassed some 45,000 miles of road trips, only 3 of which were solo, amounting to 11,000 miles alone. But they added up, opened me up, and prepared me as much as they could. It was all a logical progression of an arguably illogical endeavor. Quit your job, sell your shit, buy a van, and drive far, far away. I did that. On December 15, 2016, I headed out of Billings, Montana on the road that was just then being sprinkled with light snow as the first storm of winter blew in from the west. That road would turn out to be 25,099 miles long. You might not gather all that from that photo. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. I had a GoPro mounted on my windshield, and the voice you're going to hear is the lunatic, that guy picture you just saw, Mark. I met him in Western Belize.
As you travel, you're always on the road, and you're wondering, does the road never stop? Of course not. And it keeps going round and round and round, because then it leads to a harbor, and then you put the boat, put the car on the ship, and then that road to another road and another road, and it's never ending. Like Disneyland's never-ending story. Right. So I think life is like that. It's never ending. We just become something else, whatever that is.
When it shows the country, that's how many miles I drove in that country. The bottom left. That's close. That's close. I was going to take a little survey towards the end there, a couple minutes left, but I looked up and everybody was pretty engaged. It was a mesmerizing trip. The through line and the main character of the whole thing was that road, and it was a beautiful thing to behold the earth and roads and just the web of roads that I took, and to watch it just gradually change. I'm the guy you want driving your car. If I ask to borrow your car, it's probably safe. Yeah. There's a couple roads. Some roads are better than others. There's one called a submission in here called the Donkey Road, which was memorable and made me cry. So, but I'm not going to tell you that. You got to buy the book. So this is one that I am going to read the full 1,000 words. This is what that sounds like. One of the outreach component of Project 1000 is a thing called sessions. where I'm trying to get in with different groups and be able to lead like accountability mentored writing groups where people come together and get as a group of people and say, hey, we're going to meet every Monday at 5 o'clock for an hour for like 6 weeks. At the end of that, we'll have a bunch of submissions. I'll help you create accounts on the website, and you'll be able to, we'll have a presentation of your favorite submission where you do just like I'm doing right now, read your 1,000 words with your image. It'd be great for students and teachers and social justice groups, churches, whoever. So feel free to talk to me after this about that. This is one called Dangerous Places. The fear of the next country south was not confined to the United States. This mindset would resurface in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and only from their residents, never from travelers. Each country pointed to their southern neighbor as at least a partial source of their woes. There seemed to be a consensus, however, on El Salvador and Honduras, from those both north and south of the countries. And at first, I bought into the mala fama, disrepute, notoriety, planning quick entrance to exit routes for each country. I finally came to a crossroads. Am I a man of faith or not? Will I listen to the voices of fear or trust again in the road, my mission upon it, and in the ever-growing body of evidence of good people and safe passage? I thought of the insult to the place and its people, but also the disregard for the power, capital P, the universe, capital U, and the gods of the road, whatever all had gotten me here safely. Surely these things were unshaken by borders, and so should I be. We Americans must see ourselves in these dangerous places in context. We are the richest country in the world with the most customers and the deepest pockets for drugs, many of which are found and produced in South and Central America. The market we provide promotes, funds, and sustains corruption, crime, and violence along the coastlines and within the interiors of these countries that make up the broad drug highway to America. Midway through this road trip, a 2017 small arms survey estimated that there were 393 million guns in our country of 330 million people, 120 per 100 people, up from 88 per 100 in 2011. The U.S. State Department advises against travel to the next most evenly armed populace. Yemen, with 53 guns per 100 people, has mostly been in some state of civil war since the 1960s. According to the FBI, during my road trip, there were 34 million firearm background checks requested, 16 months, which they point out doesn't necessarily correlate to the number of firearms purchased. Could be fewer, could be more. The Mexican government has a lawsuit pending that seeks $10 billion in damages from American gun manufacturers for the 500,000 firearms that find their way southward every year. I would spend 144 days in 5 of the top 10 and 75 days in 3 of the top 5 countries with the highest rates of violent gun deaths. The U.S. may not be in that terrible top 10, but what it seems to have more than any other country is mass shootings. During my 473 days on the road, there were 420 shootings of 4 or more people, not including the shooter, that killed 541 and wounded 2,089. Within 5 months, 59 were killed, 441 wounded at a concert in Las Vegas. 27 were killed, 20 wounded at a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. And 17 were killed, 17 wounded at a high school in Parkland, Florida. We seem to be the world leaders in indiscriminate explosions of pent-up worry, frustration, and stress, and/or targeted attacks born of intolerance, fear, and/or hate. I suppose dangerous places are in the eye of the beholder. When I began outlining this book, I considered adding a little bit about American intervention in each country that had been affected. It quickly became clear during my limited research that there wasn't a single country along my path that had not been adversely affected, if not its course forever altered by American political and/or economic involvement. These themes are overwhelming and outside the scope of this 1,000 words or this book entire. But be assured, we have a part. Our closet is full of skeletons, some of the most haunting in Latin America. After 14 nights in El Salvador, I spent 15 more in Honduras. I never once felt in danger. I met good people and saw beautiful places. I spent a few nights alongside thermal river pools in the Lempira department. I washed and hung clothes and caught up on writing. And the place had some of the best fireflies I had seen thus far on my journey. They could travel maybe 50 yards, 30 seconds, flickering the entire distance. Truly amazing watching their blinking path cut through the darkness. And I thought about meaning and why we do things. Why does the firefly light up the sky? Because he was born to. And maybe it feels good. And maybe he's attracting a mate. But I think they just can't keep it in. And it's not the whole sky they light up. That would be too much to ask, far beyond their abilities, their capacities, their juice. They just light up that one small part, that small piece of the sky through which they float. And in the grand scheme of this small part of the huge sky of this unimpressive planet, in this one among billions of solar systems and all that we think we know exists, it is a wholly infinitesimal amount of light. And yet it is sufficient to capture the attention, engage the imagination, and inspire one human sharing that same moment on that same planet, in that same universe. One who is lost and searching, found and finding, doing what feels right from the inside out, regardless and because of everything and everyone. To think that in this flight of mine, I might be that light that calls someone's attention in both comforting and grandiose. But that I might just enjoy my own flight, bask in my own light, feel myself a part of the small sky in a big universe, that would be divine. It is so fleeting. I am learning from fireflies. My last real stop in Honduras was at the Parque Nacional La Tiger, where I camped nearby the Peña Blanca mine, operated by the New York and Rosario Mining Company from the 1880s through 1954. It is a site that is still recovering from years of our ravage. This one's called 35 años. Means 35 years. This is not going to be the entire thing. I'll read a little bit. We're good. The light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, whoops. I'm going to go here. A few businessmen were working. A few businessmen were working on a bottle in front of the TV in the lobby, watching the pre-match show. Shortly after we started chatting, the guys invited me to join them for the match. Soon thereafter, I was piling into a cab with 4 strangers. It turned out the hotel owner was the president of Huaraz Chamber of Commerce, and that the viewing party was in their office on the 2nd floor, adjacent the main square of the town. I had wandered by there 5 hours earlier, as people were starting to gather to watch the match on the big screen outdoors. This was a qualifier between New Zealand and Peru. There were a few rows of tables and qualifier for the World Cup. There were a few rows of tables and chairs and a modest offering of food and beverages. We claimed our spots in the front row. I spent the next 2 hours watching history. I watched players mouth their national anthem on the screen and heard people in the plaza sing. 28 minutes of near misses, gasps, and groans later, Cristian Cueva passed to the center of the box, where Jefferson Farfan right-footed the ball into the top left corner of the net. There was mayhem in and outside the room. Peru led 1-0 at the half, but no one in the room was in celebration mode. 20 minutes into the second half, just after a corner kick, Cristian Ramos right-footed the ball high into the center of the net. It wasn't until about the final 30 seconds of the match that a confident rumble began to fill the room. And soon enough, Peru had indeed qualified for their first World Cup in 35 years. When the final whistle blew, the room and Peru entire shook. I leapt to my feet and cheered with my new friends, then hurried outside into a sea of painted faces, smiling, people shouting, cheering, arms raised and around each other. Peruvian flags waved, car horns honked, fireworks exploded. It was a country mad with joy. After a bit, the fellows decided to go for a drink and a smoke down the block. We cheered our way to a corner liquor store where they ordered rum and cokes. A drunken young man stumbled up to me and screamed, "Let's go dance!" in Spanish. Bailemos. He had the perfect answer as I questioned where. "It doesn't matter!" The next day was a national holiday. That one might be a little easier to gather some of from the picture. So I did a video at 6 months, a video at 12 months, and a video when I sold the vehicle at 16 months. So this is the second 6 months.
Without knowing what you wanted them to be. So, how's it gonna be when it all comes down to cycling trivialities? So, how's it gonna be when it all comes down to cycling triviality? Who cares, say, 100 years from now? All your small steps, all your shitty clouds. Who cares, say, 100 years from now? We'll remember all the players, we'll remember all the clouds. So, how's it gonna be when it all comes down to cycling trivialities? So, where's this leaving me when it all comes down to cycling trivialities? Recycling triviality. Recycling triviality. Recycling triviality. Recycling triviality. Recycling triviality.
This is awesome. I'm going to another reading. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm gonna check out that. Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Recycling triviality. Recycling trivialities.
pretty. They have the Amazon jungle and the Andes mountains and vast desert, thousands of miles of desert, and then coast. I mean, it's just spectacular, as were many places. But that ended on Peru. Another one of those places is the Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. This is a tiny little bit from a piece called, a submission called Other Worlds. At 10,100 square kilometers, which is 3,900 square miles, the Salar de Uyuni is the world's largest salt flat. The Bonneville salt flats in Utah are 40 square miles, FYI. Yeah. Formed as a result of the evaporation of several prehistoric lakes, it is now covered with a few feet of salt crust. The average variation in elevation is only 1 meter over the entire area. When it rains, it becomes an 80-mile wide mirror, the world's largest. Juan drove a group of us to the Salar with a stop at the Salt Bazaar in Colchani on the way. Then it was on to what surely must be one of the most otherworldly places on this planet. Heat waves on the horizon make dubious both distance and the very existence of things. The recent rains shortened our tour, but added to the light play and reflections, which would be better without the flattening sun. I looked forward to the later tour I had booked for the next day. I wandered a bit around Uyuni, biding my time until the tour. I began to fill in Argentina with camping sites, routes, etc. Both Argentina and Chile were great for camping, the best south of Mexico. Diego drove us to his spot on the Salar, where we arrived about 1.5 hours before sunset. It was the most gorgeous glass, the earth a perfect recreation of the sky above. We just stayed there happily for the next 2 or 3 hours as the clouds moved and the sun fell, and the gray and blue and purple and red and orange painting above and below changed every few minutes. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. We were at the peak of it all, mid-January. We were in the center of such a magnificent mirror. While most took selfies, I shot hundreds of pictures of shifting beauty. Every time I thought I had seen it all, it would dissolve into a slightly different, exquisite iteration. I felt so blessed to be there, to witness it, be part of it, sandwiched, immersed, swimming, out of breath. It was my birthday. It was. Little bit from a submission called Beautiful Toll, and then we'll have a video, and then we're done. The next morning, I sang happy birthday to my mother, then headed to the Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of the Hands, where I arrived just in time for a free tour. We walked 10 or 15 minutes down into the Pinturas, Pictures River Canyon, whose walls had been decorated by various peoples as long ago as 11,000 BC. Out of reverence, artistic drive, and/or a desire to leave part of themselves behind, they crushed bushes and berries to make dyes, placed their hands upon these very rock walls, and blew these dyes through animal bones, silhouetting their hands. It was beautiful, spiritual, artful. I imagined them inhaling the earth and exhaling art, happy to be alive and creating, perhaps wondering who might see their hands one day. A communal camping place in Comandante Luis Piedrabuena wanted too much money, so I cruised around and finally found what might be a nice spot right along the Santa Cruz River. I took note that it flowed north. My days southward were slipping through my fingers like water. I introduced myself and asked a man who was working nearby if it was a safe place to camp. Gustavo warned against possible flooding this time of year. Otherwise, yes. I asked him where I could get some Wi-Fi in town, and he said I could come over to his place, but he'd have to wait for his son to return home to get the password. I parked behind a tree, set up my van, and made some instant soup. So happy. I cleaned up and went over to Gustavo's place around 10:15 p.m. His sons Lazaro and Lorenzo were there. I told him I just ate, but he still shared with me a small bit of steak and tomatoes. It was delicious. I watched the river run, made oatmeal and coffee, and caught up on writing. Dogs came down to the river to play, some with and some without humans. A young man rode by on a horse, then returned to bum a smoke. I returned to Gustavo's house the night before leaving. They introduced me to facturas, tasty pastries filled with dulce de leche, milk caramel. I chatted with him and Lorenzo about America and the grietas, the cracks that were appearing. Indeed, they were. A police officer tapped on my window that night. He was quiet and kind, just wondering if I were okay. I told him yes and thank you. He told me to get some rest. The next morning, Gustavo let me use his bathroom and a towel for a shower. And with the wind, I was off to Rio Gallegos, where I spent 2 nights at Chacra Saldilla, some sort of banquet room with parking and a play area outside. I got online, spread out my maps, and planned Chile, using up the last page of the yellow legal pad. It would be one of my last great homework assignments. The next day, Elsa, my 87-year-old host, asked me if I wanted some meat and veggies for lunch. I said yes, and asked how much I owed her. Te invito, she said. It was on her. I dined on tender meat with grilled onions and an onion and tomato salad. It was delectable. It was freezing both nights in Rio Gallegos. A cold, blistering wind. Gustavo had warned me. I began to worry about the pure South. I was glad not to be waiting until June. The next morning, I asked Elsa and her friend Nora where I could buy a blanket on a Sunday morning. On my way out, they called me inside for a picture. In the foreground was the blanket Elsa wanted me to have. I wept as I pulled away from their place. I was nearing the end of my journey south, and these final kindnesses were taking their beautiful toll.
Your body may be gone, I'm gonna carry you in my head, in my heart, in my soul. And maybe we'll get lucky and we'll both live again. 'Cause I don't know, I don't think so. Well, that is that, and this is this. Tell me what you want, I'll tell you what you get away from me. Collected my belongings and we left the jail. Well, thanks for the time. I had to think a spell, I had to think a while. And the ocean breeze on, won't you carry it in your head, in your mouth, in your soul? And maybe we'll get lucky and we'll both grow. Well, I don't know, I'm so. Well, that is that, and this is this. You tell me what you saw, I'll tell you what you missed when the ocean left the sky. You missed when time and I shook hands and said goodbye. When the earth folded on itself and said good night. I hope heaven and hell are really there. I wouldn't hold my breath. You wasted life, why wouldn't you waste it? 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 And the ocean breeze on, won't you carry it in your head, in your mouth, in your soul? And the more we move ahead, the more we're stuck in rewind. But I don't mind, how could I mind? Well, that at the sky. You miss when time and life shook hands and said goodbye. When the earth folded on itself and said, I hope heaven and hell are really there. I wouldn't hold my breath. You wasted life, why wouldn't you waste it? You wasted life, why wouldn't you waste it? You wasted life, why wouldn't you waste it? You wasted life, why?
That's it. I'll entertain any questions that might have popped up. No.
I was wondering if you ever had so many miles to be on the road, did you ever have any vehicle problems of any magnitude?
Nothing where I was stranded. Never blew a tire. There was stuff, because it was not the first top choice that you might think of for a road trip. It was a 2005 Dodge Grand Caravan. So there was a platform in back, a very, very well built brick shithouse type, that served as the platform for my bed, and then underneath was the storage items. So it was heavy, and then all my stuff. There was a topper for my tent and backpack and my bug out bag that I almost needed on the donkey road. So it was heavy, and it really wasn't meant to carry that load for that constantly. So I had brakes and suspension issues, but I could hear them coming, you know what I mean? So I stopped and got some work done in Mexico, Costa Rica, a little bit in Colombia, major in Lima, Peru. Yeah, a couple times, but nothing, never got stranded, never anything like that. Just maintenance, preventative, highly suggested preventative stuff like do something quick. And it was fun.
I don't know if I missed it. Is Panama in your collection?
It is.
Yeah. And were there any border issues as you were crossing?
Well, it's I'm a Spanish teacher. I don't know if I mentioned that. I speak Spanish, so I was grateful to do that because it's one thing for immigrations for people to fly in airports and stuff like that or walk across a border. I don't know why you would, but backpackers and such. But it's a different thing. It's a whole nother level when there's customs and you have a van full of stuff. So, but honestly, I think being an American, a white male American who spoke Spanish driving south, they barely even looked in my van. It would, any number of those things, especially probably going north, probably would have had a different time at borders. But some of my loveliest interactions were with immigration agents, custom agents, guys with machine guns at the border, and also police, soldiers at checkpoints throughout the countries. It was just lovely. Everyone was curious and really. I think I can't say enough about knowing Spanish. I think it's the ultimate form of respect to learn someone's language. So it really takes the piss out of anyone that really wants to start anything. But there's way more good than bad, and there was never issues. Some took longer than others. These things are not on my time frame, but that's kind of the beauty of travel, is that you realize it's not all about me or us. Americans seem to think it is. I'm one of them.
Is the music yours as well?
The music is not. I felt bad. I kind of cut these down just for time. The first song was When the Levee Breaks, because the levee had broken in my life, by Led Zeppelin. The second one is Cycling Trivialities by Jose Gonzalez. And this one is Ocean Breathe Salty by Sun Kill Moon. Yeah, I felt bad for taking those out, but definitely not that good at singing. Good. I could do other stuff. Nikki?
Did you pick up any chapters?
I did not. I technically probably could have, but I had my stuff just arranged to where I didn't have to break it down too much to sleep in my bed or cook. I mean, it was tight quarters. It's a Dodge Grand Caravan to sleep in, to cook in, to do this stuff. So I had a lot. It was kind of spoken for. I thought about a couple times. I might have had a very different experience, both good and bad, doing that. But I've thought about doing a podcast, like a traveling, like a hitchhiking podcast. I might regret that, but it'd be pretty cool.
Were there any tempting dogs that
Well, yeah, there's a story in the book. In Peru, there was in the high hills, there were dogs that got up there. I don't know where people kicked them out of the car or whatever, but they would, in pullouts, they'd be. Have you traveled?
I lived in Peru. Peru's great.
It's just it's heartbreaking in the hills there, but better than Bolivia, where there's no dogs well, there's dogs, but there's also children that are up in the hills. I don't know how they got there, got dropped off, and they will dance and do routines for money, and it's really heartbreaking. There's a story that kind of alludes to some of that, but same idea with dogs. It would have been lovely to have I mean, you could spend a lifetime rescuing dogs.
Look, you could have put a lap dog on you. I'm not judging.
Could have put a lap dog. Okay, right there. Lap dog. Any other questions?
Did you run into any women who were married? 'Cause I'm so glad you acknowledged that you're a white man, because, I mean, I'm fluent in Spanish, I've lived in Argentina and all these things, but like, as a woman, if I'm sleeping in my car and a law enforcement rapes some women, you know, and so I'm hoping to meet women also doing your journey along the way and their stories.
You know, the van was a blessing to do my own thing, but it was also like a bubble. When I lived in Costa Rica in 1999 and 2000, I met more women that were on buses because I was with the people more. I kind of regretted that part of the van. You know, white women backpacking solo through Central America.
I mean the car drive.
It doesn't ring too much of a bell. I mean, I saw very few people kind of doing it alone, except for, I got to tell this story. I thought I was something towards the end of the road in Argentina, second to the last stop, and I was like, oh, this is this dream, this thing. I had driven this 23,000 miles or something at that point, and I was there was a guy there that was from Homer, Alaska, and he had ridden there on a bicycle. I was like, come on, dude. Save some for the rest of us, you know? Can I? It's like, cheers, but, you know, it was cool. But it doesn't ring a bell too many women, you know, doing their thing. Although, you know, that southern, if there's a place to do it, it'd be kind of southern Argentina and Chile. I think it's just kind of a real backpacker's delight, and there's tons of people hitchhiking. So, yeah.
So do you know if the guy from Homer, Alaska wrote a book as well?
I don't care. I'm just kidding. Stupid book. I don't think I got his contact info. Does that say something about me? I don't know. Hopefully. As someone pointed out, he goes, yeah, but they probably didn't return with 28,000 pictures. So there's some trade-offs and stuff. But what a warrior. I met a guy at Mount Cotopaxi in Ecuador, which is I camped at about 15,000 feet there. Guy rode his bike up there.
Oh my God.
Come on, man.
It wasn't an e-bike.
It was not an e-bike. No, he took it with him when he left, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for your time. It's a lovely day. Thanks for spending a bit of it with me. And there's books out across the way here if you're interested. Or just check out, I got business cards over there, or check out project1000.com.